So when I first started crab snaring, I started off with 30-pound braid. Everywhere I looked and everywhere I read, everyone recommended braid. Braid. Braid is great because it casts further, it cuts through the water better, and it has no stretch compared to mono line. Now the problem with braid is that the color isn't very steadfast, so it fades over time, and when you're fishing and snaring in crowded conditions like the Pacific Pier or the jetty on the weekend, you're typically shoulder to shoulder with people. It's very important that you can see your line, because as you're casting and retrieving, you don't want to get tangled up with other people, and you don't want them to get tangled up with you. So I stopped using braid, and I started using Berkley Big Game monofilament in their solar collector green color. Super bright, very visible, pretty inexpensive, and I found it to be the best line for casting and visibility when using it at the pier or the Half Moon Bay jetty. Now the problem with this stuff is, one, it's mono. It stretches, and it's really hard to get a feel of the snare right before you set those snare loops. That can make the difference between catching a crab or spooking it. It's pretty inexpensive. It was only $6 for 500 yards on Amazon, and you're going to need that economy. Exposed mono to UV and salt goes brittle over time. It really only lasts for 1 or 2 seasons. So I thought to myself, what's the best way of combining the benefits of braid and the solar collector green mono when using it for crab snaring? The Braid Top Shot. Let me explain. I took one of my crab snaring setups that already had 20-pound mono, took off 30 or 40 yards of mono, and put on 20 or 30 yards of 20-pound braid, tied it all together with an FG knot. FG knots are perfect for combining mono to braid. Learn how to tie them. They're really easy if you do them a few times, but they're the best, smallest profile knot that I think exists for tying braid to mono, and you're going to need that small diameter and low profile knot, because when you cast, you don't want any resistance as that knot passes through your rings, especially when you're casting 6 to 8 ounces. You don't want any snags. You don't want your line to break at that knot. So I went from this to this, the Braid Top Shot. So not only do I get the benefits of this very visible mono above the surface of the water, I get the benefits of having braid below the surface of the water, which is key for setting your snares and having line that can cut through the big swells that are at the Pacific Pier and the Half Moon Bay jetty. So how much do you need? Let's go through that. Art time! Let's take 100 yards as a nice round number for the amount of actual line that goes from the tip of your rod to where your snare ends up. I guesstimate that the average depth of water at the Pacific Pier and the Half Moon Bay jetty ranges between 50 and 20 feet. So, again, rough numbers. I'm guesstimating 30 to 40 yards of that actual line is below the surface of the water. 60 to 70 yards of that mono is exposed. So I tipped myself 30 to 40 yards of braid, which will give me the benefits of braid underneath the surface of the water. That's that no stretch for that instant snare set, and the cutting action that braid gives you as it slices through the waters and the big swells of the Pacific Pier and the jetty. But you still retain the visibility of this Berkley Solar Collector Green Mono, which is important when you're fishing with a ton of other people. Some people call it combat fishing. I call it combat snaring. And just a few additional tips for casting your crab snares using braided line. You want to make sure that your bail is always in this position in relation to your rod. When the bail is set open, it minimizes the chance for the bail to snap closed as you cast. A lot of guys like to use rubber bands to hold the bail open during cast. I found it to be kind of cumbersome. I've never really had a problem casting this reel. This is a 6000 Penn Fierce 2 with the bail in this position as I'm casting. And again, you're going to want a pretty big reel for crab snaring. There's a ton of drag when you're reeling in these crabs. They dig into the sand, and sometimes you have 2, even 3 crabs just parachuting through the water. And a graphite reel and a reel sub 6000 size isn't going to cut it. Trust me, I've broken reels and I've gone through 5000 size reels and smaller trying to haul crab in. These 6000 size reels tend to have the diameter of spool that you want, good gearing, and just as importantly, large levers and handles to get that leverage you're going to need to torque those crabs in. If you're casting braid, you're going to want to protect your finger too. A lot of guys use duct tape. Here's what I use. It's great. Casting glove. This is a single-digit neoprene casting glove I found on eBay for $1.59. That is like nothing. This one's lasted me about 2 seasons. I've not even worn through the neoprene. I'm not come close. So I definitely recommend a casting glove like this. Slip it on your tip of your finger before cast, after cast, peel it back, tuck it into your sleeve or tuck it back into itself, and it's out of the way. Definitely worth it. You don't want to cut your finger to the bone while casting braid, and it's very easy to do if you miscast using braid and 8 ounces on the end of your line. And I'm often asked, how much weight do you use when crab snaring? And it really depends on the conditions. A nice rule of thumb is to use 1 ounce of lead for every 1 foot of swell. It really depends on the conditions, but if there's a 4-foot swell, 4 ounces should be okay. If there's an 8-foot swell, you might need 8 ounces. Anything more than that, it's probably not a good day to be crab snaring. Guaranteed the crabs are going to be hunkered down in the sand or just not in the area because there's just so much movement in the water. It's not worth it for them to be in that area and try to feed. So they normally burrow and wait it out. So I definitely think that 8 ounces is the most amount of weight you're going to be able to put on your snare and have an effective day, because anything more than that and the crabs just aren't going to be there. So again, that's 1 ounce of weight for your 1 foot of swell. Check the swell reports before you go out. Knowing ahead of time what the water is going to be like, what the conditions are going to be like, can definitely make or break your crabbing day. So once again, this is the Braid Top Shot for crab snaring. Top shotting is typically when you put about 20 or 30 yards of mono on top of your braided spool, but this is a little different. You're not trying to hide your line from the crabs. You're trying to maintain visibility of your line and sensitivity of your line in crowded fishing conditions. So until next time, guys, maybe I'll see you on the jetty, the pier, or the shore. I'm out. Alright, we got a sub-size female that's pregnant.
There you go, Jimmy.
So anyone that's impacted with crabs like this, or any crabs that are impacted like with eggs like this, definitely want to let them go even if they're keepers.
Wow. It's pregnant. You can't keep it though.
Yeah.
It's a bed boat. Oh, okay.